A boundary can sound powerful and still teach people that it is optional. You say, "Do not speak to me like that again." The sentence is clear. The emotion is real. For a moment, everyone understands what you mean. Then the same tone appears again. You explain the boundary. You defend why it matters. You give one more chance, then another. The words remain strong, but your pattern becomes negotiable. This is the part most advice leaves out. People may not update their expectations because of the boundary sentence. They update when they see what reliably happens after the sentence. That is why the real test of a boundary is not how forcefully you announce it. It is whether your next action makes the limit believable. Today, we are going to look at the quiet mechanism behind that change, why follow-through carries more information than explanation, and how to protect a boundary without becoming cold, dramatic, or controlling. First, a boundary is not a command for another person to obey. "You cannot cancel on me at the last minute" is a demand. If plans are canceled at the last minute, I will stop reserving that time, and we can make plans only when they are confirmed is a boundary. The difference is not just wording. It is ownership. A command tries to control another person's behavior. A boundary describes the action you will take to protect your time, access, attention, or safety. This matters because a boundary becomes observable only when it changes your own behavior. Until then, it is information about what you dislike. After follow-through, it becomes information about what you will and will not participate in. That does not mean every boundary needs a dramatic consequence. In many situations, the consequence is small. You end the conversation. You leave the meeting. You stop answering after midnight. You move a request into writing. You make a different plan. You no longer offer the same access under the same conditions. There is a useful reason this works. Human beings form expectations about other people, and those expectations help the mind predict what will happen next. Research on interpersonal expectations has found that confirmation can be rewarding. In simpler language, people feel a kind of stability when reality behaves the way they expected it to behave. When an outcome repeatedly contradicts an expectation, people have reason to update it. Recent work using repeated real-life reports connects expectation and outcome discrepancies with belief updating. The details are complex, and no single study proves a universal rule about relationships, but the direction is useful. Repeated behavior gives other people better data than a single emotional statement. If you say, "I will end the call when you insult me," and then calmly end the call when the insult arrives, the other person receives a clear signal. Not a threat, a pattern. If you say the same sentence, but remain on the call for an hour, the pattern contains a different signal. Your words say the limit is real. Your behavior says the limit can be crossed without changing access. This is why people sometimes describe a boundary as being tested. It is not necessarily a conscious plan to manipulate you. Often, a person is simply acting from an old expectation and watching what happens now. Their behavior may be careless, entitled, confused, habitual, or intentionally pressuring. You do not need to diagnose the motive in order to respond to the pattern. The useful question is not, what are they secretly trying to do? The useful question is, what will I do if this behavior continues? The most common failure happens after the boundary, when pressure arrives and you start explaining. You explain the history. You explain the hurt. You explain why you're not being unreasonable. You explain the exceptions. You explain what you meant when the other person challenges the wording. Some explanation is healthy. Context can prevent confusion, but explanation becomes a problem when it replaces a decision. The more you argue for the legitimacy of your boundary, the more the conversation can quietly move from your choice to their approval. Now the other person is no longer responding to the boundary. They're judging whether you have earned the right to have it. You do not need universal agreement before taking your own action. A boundary is a participation decision, not a debate proposition. You do not have to fill the gap created by a new limit with another paragraph. You can let the action carry the meaning. Consider a workplace example. You have told a colleague that urgent requests sent late in the day cannot always be completed by the next morning. You keep staying late to rescue the request. The colleague may simply learn that late requests still receive priority. The next time it happens, a credible follow-through could sound like this. I can review this tomorrow at 10. If it needs to be finished tonight, it will need another owner. Then you do exactly that. You do not add a speech about how hard you work. You do not punish the person. You do not make a public performance of your frustration. You make the time boundary real. Now, consider a friendship. A friend repeatedly makes plans, cancels at the last moment, and expects you to remain available. Your boundary might be, I am happy to make plans, but after a last-minute cancellation, I will not hold another evening open. Reach out when you know your schedule. The follow-through is not revenge. It is simply that you stop holding the evening open. You continue your life. In each example, the boundary protects your participation. It does not require the other person to become a different person on command. Here is the three-part structure. Name the condition. State your action. Enact it without adding a performance. Name the condition in observable language. Avoid labels like, you are disrespectful, when you can describe the behavior. When the conversation becomes insulting, or when the deadline changes without notice. State your action in the first person. I will end the call. I will review this tomorrow. I will not hold that time open. I will move this request to email. Then enact it at the relevant moment. Not later, after another argument. Not with a larger threat designed to make the first threat sound serious. The smallest action you can repeat is usually stronger than the biggest action you cannot sustain. That last point is easy to miss. A boundary should be designed for your real life, not for an imaginary version of you who never gets tired or feels guilty. If you know you will not leave the job today, do not use leaving the job as your boundary. If you cannot stop contact completely, do not pretend that you can. Choose an action you can actually own. Credibility grows when your words describe a behavior you are prepared to perform. Keep one distinction clear. A boundary says, this is what I will do to manage my participation. Control says, I will make you behave differently so that I can feel safe. Follow through protects your time, attention, safety, or access. It becomes coercive when it is used to punish someone for having an independent choice. You can revise a boundary when new information appears. Revising it is not weakness. The important thing is that your response remains coherent with the condition you named. So what changes when you follow through? First, you stop spending as much energy trying to persuade someone that your limit is legitimate. Second, the relationship receives clearer information. The other person may adapt, negotiate respectfully, become distant, or escalate. Their response gives you information about what kind of relationship is possible under the new conditions. Third, you begin to trust your own decisions. Self-respect is not only a feeling that arrives before action. It is also a memory created by action. Each time you do what you said you would do, you make your own internal standard easier to recognize next time. This is the quiet shift. You're no longer waiting for a perfect reaction before believing your boundary. You're using your behavior to make the boundary visible. And visibility changes the conversation. The debate about whether you are serious ends because the next step is no longer theoretical. The goal is not to make every person respect you. You cannot control that outcome. The goal is to make your participation legible. People should not have to guess whether the same condition will receive the same response every time. Say less when the decision is already clear. Choose a consequence that belongs to you. Follow through calmly enough that the action does not need a dramatic explanation. If someone dislikes the boundary, they're allowed to dislike it. Discomfort is not automatically a sign that the boundary is unfair. At the same time, their discomfort is not proof that you are right about everything. The evidence is in the specific behavior, the specific limit, and the action you can responsibly take. That is what makes follow-through powerful. It is not an attempt to win the interaction. It is a way to stop outsourcing your standard to someone else's reaction. What boundary have you explained more than once? And what small action will you take next time? Share your answer in the comments. Your example may give someone else a clearer way to act. If you want more calm, research-aware documentaries about boundaries, status, attention, and self-command, subscribe to Quiet Power Code and become part of the community. The point of this channel is not louder advice. It is clearer behavior. People do not always change because you found stronger words. Sometimes they change because your next action finally gave the words a stable meaning. The boundary is the sentence. The follow-through is the signal that teaches the relationship what is real.